Okay, I'm going to bring this work session to order. We can try to make up some time here. Okay, welcome to part 2 of the instruction work session, in which we'll be talking about the Family Life Education Curriculum Advisory Committee recommendations. Welcome back to Dr. Presidio. I will ask him to introduce staff and other guests and make the presentation on the executive summary, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rita. The presentation will be very brief. I know that we're running over, and I know that you'll probably have questions about this topic, but I would like to note that we're here today with the recommendations from the Family Life Education Advisory Committee. Oh, well, you know what? That is not a problem because that breeze feels excellent. That is a small price to pay. Oh, my goodness. I literally was in the hot seat for the last 2 hours, so it was something else. Yes. Okay, but very briefly, just by way of introduction, I just want to let you know that we've been working as a committee over the course of the past year to review the entire Family Life Education program. But actually, some of the objectives and lesson objectives the committee's been working on for about 2 years that you're going to see today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Liz Payne, who's been facilitating our committee work this year, and she's our coordinator for health and PE, as you know. And I'd also like to introduce you to Jason Morgan, who is the parliamentarian for the committee, and he's been here with us all afternoon waiting patiently, so I want to thank him for being involved in the presentation today. So Liz will give you the high-level overview, and then we'll go straight to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Presidio. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, to give a little bit of background, the committee had 6 meetings, 2 of which they spent in small group discussions on all the topics in Family Life Education program. They did some small group discussion, large group. We had individual feedback forms to get their input about what their thoughts were about the curriculum. Then the next meeting they spent looking at the overlap with the revised general health standards of learning and our Family Life Education program. As noted, the revisions to the general health standards of learning now include things in the emotional, social, mental health area that we have traditionally had in Family Life Education. So in the document, as you see strikeouts and notations of the full report, those items now will still be instructed but considered non-Family Life Education, meaning that they don't carry an opt-out option. They will be instructed within the general health curriculum. Things such as based on relationships, mental health, suicide, depression, those topics will no longer be opted out of, so to speak. The additional topics that were added after we went through all that, the committee went through the parliamentarian process to look at every grade level one by one, to look at those overlaps and to look at any additional things or scaffolding items that they wanted to add to the curriculum. So the first bullet notation of the development of individual identity includes sexual orientation, gender identity added to grades 7 and 8. That actually began as discussion 2 years ago, last school year, with the committee looking at the youth survey results in this area, SR&R language that we have for students, and we had a school psychologist come to the meeting last year. So we had begun that discussion last year and started developing objectives at the 7th and 8th grade level. It is currently in our 9th and 10th grade level, and that remains unchanged. In addition, we added more emphasis on sexual assault and sexual consent at grade levels. Sexual assault had been included in our 10th grade curriculum, but now being in the objective shows more explicit instruction. In 11th grade, we did add additional topics of contraception and dating violence. That curriculum was at one time listed to STIs. And HIV and AIDS education, and now adding those 2 additional things. I could go through the rest of the bullet points, but I think the next big thing that we're working on is parent access to the lessons. We are working with our IT department to develop a module in Blackboard similar to the way that the emergency care information is handled, so that we could post lessons for parents in a way that the parents can access them, but students cannot. In talking with IT, they They said the module is ready, but they hit some glitch about access to other components that they want to limit the access. So they are working with Blackboard on that. I am extremely hopeful that that will be ready by the end of the summer, but they're not clear yet on when they can get that worked out. So we're hoping to do that. Right now, all of the lessons and media are available at all the schools. So just to reiterate our school board process, following this work session with any additional recommendations or changes, we will be a new business item, and that new business item is followed by 30-day community review. Because this is all Word document, lesson objectives, this will go up for 30-day community review on the website, the regular FLE website that parents access to get opt-out forms and more information. Those comments will be collected through an email and will be shared with the school board at the end of the June 19th conclusion of that community review, and then provided to the board for their consideration in the action item on June 25th.
If I might add a couple of things, I think the most recent recommendation that we've received, at least since I've been here from FLECLAC, was the sex trafficking curriculum.
Yes, ma'am.
And you all went through a similar process to gather parent input with regard to that content,
Yes,
if I recall. The fact that some of this is coming up now is just coincidental. It has nothing to do with the policy change that the board had before them last week. It's just a matter of the way that the committee does their work. They would typically bring their recommendations to the board in this May timeframe, and it just happened that it just kind of worked this way, a little bit coincidental with regard to some of this overlapping in terms of content. Assuming this moves forward and is adopted by the board after the 30-day review period, I believe you indicated it would probably take a year to get the materials developed and implemented. Is that correct?
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Payne?
For any of the new objectives, things that we've added content to, it's probably going to take a year because we've had SOL revisions for health, physical education, and driver education. Staff can't handle everything. So in some grade levels, especially in lower grade levels where we're just, if approved, we would just remove the FLE tag from some of the lessons. The lessons are done. They meet our new general health SOLs. That's a simple fix. But many of these others, I don't believe are going to get all of the secondary 7 through 12 completed. We would certainly let parents know through the opt-out forms and those things, but I'm fairly confident that we're not going to get that done until the next year. So full implementation of these, if approved, for secondary especially, would be fall of 2016.
Thank you. Thank you for that very concise summary. It's very helpful. I have Mr. Moon followed by Mrs. Schultz.
Just one quick question. Most of the recommendations had unanimous support from those who are voting, but there were a couple with one person objecting or not supporting the recommendations. Could you possibly elaborate what the objections were?
Yes, sir. All committee members were strongly encouraged to connect with their school board members to ensure that they shared the work and to talk about their thoughts and feelings around these recommendations. While I don't like to speak for other people, my inference is in our conversations, it was more about the grade level piece with the sexual orientation, gender identity, because there was unanimous votes with 9th and 10th grade.
Okay, that's how I saw it. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz.
Well, this is going to be no shock. I'm stunned at the level of swath of recommendation about compelling children for things that were previously within a parental rights discretion to choose. And as a parent who has regularly taken advantage of opt-out, what was the basis? What was the degree of community engagement that you did with parents parents, and for what basis? Because one of the things that I've asked for all along, and in my tenure on the board, it's become more difficult to opt out. We used to send home an opt-out form to parents, and now we make parents seek out the form and print out the form. And then we tell them when it's back to school time, when you're going to enroll, when you're getting lockers, when you're getting forms, they'll have the forms there. It's not true. There are no forms there, and they scramble. So, I mean, what would be the basis for us eliminating more parental rights and parental discretion over much of this? So that's the first question.
So if I could have a follow-up question, are you referring to things that we struck out? The things
so you said all the things that were struck out are no longer at the option of the parents. You are incorporating that into the curriculum, and the parents no longer have a choice.
Because they now align to the new general health standards of learning. They now meet those, the state standards.
Right, but we start at kindergarten or wherever these strikeouts start, and they're substantial. And so why are we in a position to tell parents you no longer have the right on what formerly was your right? So say you've got a parent who has, I don't know, a junior in high school, an 8th grader in middle school, and a 1st grader, that your junior and your 8th grader were able to be opted out, but your 1st grader, you have no choice anymore.
And that would be because the general health standards of learning cannot be opted out of. So this is now required instruction under the standard of learning.
So the state government is compelling parents to have their children learn things that previously were within a parental right discretion to opt out of.
I mean, that's what the whole community review process is for as well. So we can
So that's number
certainly
one.
take that
Number
feedback.
two, the fact that we are even contemplating the gender identity within 48 business hours of the vote, I cannot believe we're going here, because we are going to pay the price, because we just told everybody nothing will happen, nothing will happen, nothing will happen. And on the second full business day after we took that vote, we are contemplating adding gender identity directly into and discussions around this. And we can explain away all we want that this is a state standard, but if the state is compelling our children to learn about gender identity, then where was that discussion, and where have we advised the public that now that becomes a compelled part of your children's education?
So these two topics, the sexual orientation, gender identity, as we mentioned earlier, began that conversation last year, and there were two objectives that we were going to bring forward last year. However, because of the changes that were coming from the health standards revision, we felt it was prudent to hold on to those and bring
They
it
were your
forward.
objectives for what purpose? Whose objectives?
Bring objectives forward from the committee last year on this topic for
For
7th
what?
and 8th
But
grade.
why was it an objective of the committee?
Well, the sexual orientation, gender identity piece had been a discussion about whether or not to add it to 7th and 8th grade. We looked at the youth survey results showing that students who were identified as something other than heterosexual were at high risk for a lot of risky
So
behaviors.
but you're saying it was the committee's decision to take this on.
Yes, ma'am.
So this isn't compelled by the state. This was
No, ma'am.
appointees to the individual committee that made it their business to put this on the agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So
The state piece had to do with notification. Those are two separate. I just want to be clear about that. I think we're mixing up two different answers.
No. I get that.
Okay.
Wherever it's been struck, we're now saying formerly parents had a right, and now the state is telling us you no longer have the right to opt your children out of that. You're going to be taught that even though you may have had older children go through the system, you now no longer have the option. So the state government's going to compel it. And then on this other, we're hearing that it's been the committee's work all along Not compelled by federal, not compelled by state, but it's been the committee's work all along to ensure this got on our agenda.
Ms. Smith has a clarifying question.
When I look at the bigger report, and I had this question, so I thought it was clear, but I'm be closer. When I look at page 16, that's what it shows on my thing of the full report, and it says recommended lesson objectives for grade 7 emotional and social health. But then when it says in the note, lesson objectives 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.6, and 7.7 will continue to be included in the emotional and social health unit. However, these objectives will no longer be considered family life education instruction. But 7.1 is not listed in that. What is 7.1 considered then? Do you understand my question? Oh, yes, ma'am. It's the original strikeout. So the original 7.1 was struck out and replaced by a new 7.1.
Okay.
That's why it's not listed. So that's a place where we just replaced it with a different one.
So that is considered part of the general health standards from the state, or that's 7.1 is considered an FLE piece?
7.1 is considered FLE, but has been revised, and it was revised so much we just made it a new objective.
So my question is 7.1 is still part of what parents can opt out of if they want to. It's
Correct.
not considered, that's the
Correct.
clarification.
Correct.
It's not considered part of the instruction that is now general health standards.
Correct. That's
Thank
why
you.
the note states lesson objective 7.2.
But Ms. Smith, that doesn't go to my point. My point is that when you look at the substantive amount of documentation here that's struck out, that previously was considered within the purview of parents, and that parents had a latitude by lesson, so they may choose 90% of it, but there may be one or two lesson plans where they say, no, that is within my purview, within my values as a parent, to have that discussion in my own home. And now what we're saying is that's no longer family life. It's compulsory education, and you're going to have to learn it no matter what. And for example, I'm talking about 8.5. 8.5 goes directly into 8th graders talking about sexual orientation and gender identity. We're not even into high school yet. And so now things that, and no, don't shake your head. I know exactly
No,
what you're going to say.
8.5 isn't listed as an emotional and social health unit.
No.
8.5 is not struck out for...
I know it's not struck out, but my point is that is now added, and so now we have had a very clear delineation in the past that you got a lesson plan, so now some things are going to be tucked into the curriculum over here that formerly we knew, and now you're going to have to piecemeal, and we've moved down to middle school talking about gender identity. And yes, that's still opt-out, but a parent's now not going to know that, oh, by the way, 40, 50, 60, 70% of what you formerly had a right to as a parent to discuss and choose whether or not you were going to have that curriculum delivered to your child within the public school system or not. You now have to find what that is, and now are we compelling parents, okay, well, you know what, are we going to drive parents out of our school system over having to hunt and peck and find and choose where what used to be the FLE curriculum now is partially tucked over here in the regular curriculum, and then you hunt and peck through the rest of it, and you may have options in certain circumstances, and we're right here at and this is the essence of the conversation from Thursday. We've already identified, and Mr. McElveen, I would appreciate some respect, really, honestly. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at you. Honestly, you know what? I provided a great amount of cover for you on Thursday, and I would appreciate the same respect. So that we're already talking about discussing gender identity, not as a part of the state. So some of it we've moved over into the curriculum because it's state, and some of it we're leaving here, but this is not compelled by the state. So this we have leapt into the depths and murky water immediately, and the backlash is going to be severe. And I am very, very worried that we're taking this up right now.
I just, Dr. Presidio, I just want to make sure that we have clarity for the board. As I understand it, all of this that Liz Payne has brought to us is because our appointees to the Family Life Education have been working on this. If we're upset with any or all of our appointees because they elected to bring this as part of their research work and recommendations, then that's what the 12 of us have to wrestle with and have the conversation with one another in making the overall decision, correct? I mean, as I understand it, you're just simply here to let us know on behalf of the committee as the liaison, this is the work they've done, these are the recommendations they're bringing. If you as a board individually or collectively don't like these recommendations, that's what the work session's for. So, Ms. Schultz, I do understand. I do think it's important, though, just to note it is very much a coincidence because I talked to my appointee to FLE, and it's something they've been talking about, as you mentioned, for at least a year now.
Last year and this year.
Yeah. So, Ms. Schultz, is there anything you wanted to add right now? Okay.
Any other board members have comments? Ms. Strauss.
In my read of this, it looks to me as though anything dealing with sexual behaviors, biological sex, anything at all, it still remains an FLE and parents can opt out.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm looking at more sort of good, positive character development, which is basically what we have in all of our schools. It looks to me as though those pieces are the ones that are now a part of sort of healthy life practices.
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't know whether or not, in order to facilitate those parents who might be frustrated that they don't exactly know where it is that they want to opt out, is it possible for us to indicate these are the grades and areas where a certain amount of discussion may take place having to do with reproduction, sexuality, et cetera, so that parents know where that is. Is that possible to facilitate that so they're not upset?
Yes, ma'am. And that's one of the reasons we want to get the lessons posted in such a way that
Right.
parents can access them so it's
Right.
very clear. It's not only just looking at the lesson
Exactly.
objectives, but they have access to those lessons as well. We do understand there's going to have to be a communication process
Exactly.
around this to ensure that parents are aware of what's happening.
Right. So parents who have concerns in those areas will be able to easily find out where it is so they are alerted, and if they don't want their child to be a part of that, so that they will know and can opt out.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Hines.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed part of the meeting, but I'm just, from looking through this before, it looks like, even though there were some changes made, none of this looks like it was controversial to the committee because, and I see in all the recommendations, there's only one no vote on anything. Most of them were unanimous votes for the changes that were made, right? Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Other board members' comments or questions? Ms. McLaughlin.
So, in light of recent board actions and discussion, I do think it's important that we have as much clarity in what's being presented at this work session. So, if I understand what Ms. Strauss is trying to say, and maybe going back to Ms. Schultz, what you were raising, the concerns around this topic, parents still do have the right to opt out. So I guess maybe my question goes back to Ms. Schultz. Which area is it your understanding that they can't opt out of?
Well, anything that's not a strikeout, they can opt out of. But the problem is that all the strikeouts have now been embedded in the curriculum, and the parents will no longer have a choice on all of the strikeouts for the move over. So now we're sort of bifurcating what was previously an FLE curriculum, and parents aren't going to know what used to be an opt-out and is now embedded.
So you're saying that what was moved out of FLE and now moved over to health, and the health instruction, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is there, when you look at what's being moved over to the health curriculum,
just to help all of us as a board, are there areas that you're looking at and saying, I think that could present a problem for our families?
Yes.
And what
Yes, and it's not surprising that there was one committee vote against it. So there we go. Is that a committee of appointees of this board are going to vote like this board is not a shock.
but
I think maybe you're trying to understand if there are particular topics that you as a board may recommend to remain in FLE as opposed to be moving to general health.
Why can't we leave it all in FLE?
And that is certainly up to the board
Okay.
to consider.
I think what would be helpful is to be able to identify which areas were moved over to the health curriculum like if there's specific areas that you had concerns.
I think doing this doing this magnitude of work where you're taking what are long-standing historical topics that have always been within a parental right area and moving them out and putting them and embedding them in the curriculum and telling parents you no longer have the choice without doing public engagement will yield us just as much, if not more, trust issues with the public. And that anything of this magnitude, if we're going to move it over and it's not going to be ready for a year anyway, let's do a public engagement piece and find out not what one individual member that was appointed by each of us feels, but what the public, who this will ultimately impact, what the public feels.
Okay, so that's definitely a proposal for the board to consider with this work session. Ms. Smith, you indicated you wanted to speak? Okay.
Part of this process is the 30-day period for the community to provide feedback, and typically staff then has provided that information to the board about what the community feedback is. I figured that will continue to be part of the process.
Yes, ma'am.
To me, that's our community engagement piece, and I would not support doing something else.
Before I do go-backs, does anybody else want to speak? I'll take a quick turn before the go-backs. And
Since we're talking about this specifically, how have we notified parents of the opportunity to provide us input? I can't remember from last year.
yeah, that was actually one of my questions.
I'm sorry, Ms. Reed.
okay.
I thought
That's
since
all
it was a kind of a continuation of Ms. Smith's comments.
We go through DCCO and put something in the My FCPS Family Now, and we also do a kit message to take them to the website to provide comments.
So, I suggest in this particular case we might over-communicate just to make sure that everybody's aware of these proposed changes so nobody is caught by surprise. That was my first comment. And secondly, I just wanted to understand, again, the issues associated with sexual orientation and gender identity. Did I hear you say that they were already in the 9th and 10th curriculum, but now it's a proposal to bring it also down to 7 and 8?
Yes,
Did I hear
ma'am.
that?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's already been in I'm saying it again, just
Yes, ma'am.
in our 9th and 10th grade curriculum.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm certain that there are a lot of people that didn't know that. So this is a very good and helpful discussion. So what you're saying is that the committee then is saying, I'm just now reiterating what you said, because of the youth survey, that you felt it was important that the younger age kids begin to have this education, right?
Yes, ma'am. And we require students who SR&R in the sexual harassment piece not to harass based on these things, and working with Department of Special Services with the OCR presentation that all students had to look at. They also felt that students truly did not have instruction on what these terms mean, and felt strongly that it was important.
Okay, and lastly, my question is more about the process. If you all could comment on how the meetings went. Were they constructive? Were people throwing rocks at each other and screaming? I mean, what kind of meetings? How would you describe these meetings?
Well, I'll have Mr. Morgan answer that if he's okay with that.
Yes, Ms. Payne. I can speak to the process. My role as the parliamentarian for the committee was to help them ensure that they had fair, effective, efficient meetings. And what I observed was These were very open meetings. These were not rubber stamp meetings. Everyone was able to participate, and in fact, I think everyone participated extensively. Diverse viewpoints were expressed, and a lot of the results are the results of very nuanced compromises. That, yes, the final outcomes were largely non-controversial. However, that was because they put a lot of effort into discussing and finding out what it is they felt would reflect the community values at large.
And were there courageous conversations? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, quick go backs, and then we're going to finish up here by 4:30 so that we can start facilities 30 minutes late. Ms. Strauss, followed by Ms. McLaughlin.
I was just going to comment on some of the areas that are now that are being proposed not to be part of family life education. As I'm reading through them carefully, most of them really line up very well with our behavior positive supports and sort of the other pieces of the curriculum that are routine in all of our classrooms. And I'm looking at a kindergarten one that talks about students will identify ways an individual's behavior may affect others, and it talks about good manners, being respectful, and it does add not sharing your name on the internet. And these clearly have nothing to do with sexual behavior at all, and it really has to do with appropriate manners and positive behaviors in classrooms so that we have order.
We also found alignment with social studies, with discussion of community and what a community
Exactly.
is in kindergarten and first grade.
Right. But again, putting it out to the community for a 30-day period, if parents have a lot of objection to talking about good manners and respect and things like that, we need to know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. McLaughlin for the final word.
So I think what Ms. Reed was asking Dr. Payne to speak to is the fact that some of the content, it was actually just a matter of was it being taught at 10th grade and now bringing it down to, was it 8th grade, Dr. Payne, or 7th grade? 7th and 8th. The point being that if we don't get the information in front of students in time, then we miss that window. So as I understood, part of the issue of moving some things down from 10th grade to 7th and 8th grade was more about definitions, just making sure kids understood what things are because they're facing it in 7th and 8th grade. And if we wait till 10th grade, we run the risk that as an educational institution, we didn't educate them in time. And so I do understand how important it is for our public to feel that beyond our advisory committee, that they can also speak to us. So I'm in full support of what Ms. Reed said. Let's over-communicate. Let's let our community know that this is now before the board. And, we are fortunate that what we're talking about is the actual issues that will be taught. But then the curriculum and how it's going to be presented, that's going to be another year. So the community continue to also be part of the dialogue. It's not happening immediately this coming fall. And so that, I think, gives us time as a school system to continue to have families have their awareness made about the content we're delivering and their comfort level with that. Thank you.
Okay. With that, this work session is adjourned. Thank you very much. We didn't have any specific next steps, I don't believe. No, okay.
Over communicate.
Where is, let's see, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Liz. All right, we're going to be moving on to our final work session on facilities. We'll be taking a quick break as we set up for the next presentation. So it'll be a 5-minute break.